I'm really happy to be back with you and also to be back with you at this juncture in time, right? It's December 6th, I think. Yep, December 6th. And we're sort of in this period of time, both in the natural world, and sort of in the world of different religions where we're coming into a holiday season. Christmas is coming at the end of this month. Hanukkah is coming in the Jewish tradition, and other traditions have holidays in this month. And I wanted to use our sanctuary today to talk about one of the holidays of the Christian tradition, which whether you are part of that tradition or not, I think can be a profound teaching for all of us. Just like the rituals of any tradition really can be wonderful jewels for our own spiritual growth, no matter what path we're on. And in the Christian tradition right now, we're in this what's called Advent season, which are the weeks leading up to Christmas. And depending on the tradition you were raised in, if you were raised Christian, you may associate these weeks with the Advent calendar. And even if you weren't raised Christian, you go to the grocery store and you see all these different Advent calendars or an Advent wreath in people's homes, or you may have gone to an Advent concert. Um, and that might be just the only association you have with Advent, but there's actually a very rich and beautiful invitation of this season that I wanted to speak to today, because I know for me, and I'm guessing for many of you, this can be a great reminder and reset, um, for our journey. So originally, Advent in the very early Christian tradition was a profound opportunity to reflect, for people to reflect sort of on the state of their own lives, reflect on their relationship with God, and kind of reorient their inner compass towards true north, whatever true north is for you, right? For the Christians, true north is this sense of divine compassion and generosity that Christmas symbolizes in the birth of Christ. Um, but any of us can sort of welcome in this invitation to reorient ourselves. These weeks leading up to Christmas can be a profound opportunity to wake up and to really cultivate another level of what I would call spiritual attentiveness that can result in a profound transformation. The root of the word Advent comes from the Latin adventus, which means arrival or coming, and symbolized in the Christmas story, the coming of Christ, right? This arrival of Jesus. But we can hold that same word and we can hold that same energy of coming to symbolize a greater arrival for any of us, which really, in a way, can be the arrival of our own divinity coming more fully into birth, if you want, into humanity. Um, and the term adventus was given in a way to offer hope, hope at this particular time of year when in the natural world, life and light are fading from view as we enter winter. And depending on where you live, and I know we have a lot of Canadians joining, you're further ahead in that process, right? Where the days are getting much darker earlier. Um, the leaves are probably largely gone from your trees, and even here in California, it's getting much darker. It's getting much colder, and I notice for myself every December when I'm like looking out the window or I'm in my car and it's sort of 4:30 or 5 o'clock and it's already getting dark, I do experience this loss and this sense of kind of depression, sadness, loneliness, even that the sun is feels like the sun is going away. And there's a little bit of grieving and loss about that. And if you take that and then add in everything else that's going on for us globally and collectively, coronavirus and all the other crises that are happening, we may even feel that stronger this year, right? And especially because for many of you and me this year, we're not able to do the normal rituals we might do or gather with our family or loved ones during December and the way we might gather. There may be even a stronger sense of feeling sad or grieving or even depressed. And in talking to many people that I talk to, and even myself, I can feel it can feel even a little more darker at this time of year. And yet, Advent, the original intention of it was an invitation to consciously enter this darkness and to recognize this darkness, actually, not from a place so much that may feel depressed, but more from a place of hope. Hence the word Adventus, right? Arrival, a coming. That can we enter into this darkness a little more consciously and a little more intentionally with a sense of hope and faith in knowing that out of this darkness, actually, something powerful, some more element of the light within us and around us will return. Just in a way that we know, even though it's getting darker and we may be feeling missing the sun and we may be feeling depressed, some part of us knows spring will come back, summer will come back, the sun will return. Advent, in a way, is to kind of cultivate that knowing for us spiritually, that it's okay to linger a little more in this darkness, in this waiting, in this emptiness as a practice, as a way of quieting ourselves, as a way of connecting back to, just like those bare trees outside, connect back to what are the bare essentials in me? What is that deeper kind of stability and strength and hope in me that isn't necessarily dependent on what's going on around us? Gail Boss, who's a spiritual author, wrote this beautiful little book using nature and specifically different creatures, animals in nature, to illustrate the deeper mysteries of Advent. And she says, the early church read the ebbing of light and heat and vegetable life each year as a foreshadowing of the time when life as we know it will end completely. That our human life will end is the rock bottom truth we sense deep in our primal bones every December. And it rightly terrifies us. To this abiding fear of an end, the tradition spoke of an adventus, a coming. The dark, in this sense, is seen not as an end, but as a symbol of what's coming next. The practice of Advent has always been about helping us understand the mystery of a new beginning out of what looks like darkness and death. When I read this week in preparing for this talk, it really hit me. Wow, that's a whole other level of thinking about this season, both just in terms of what's going on in the natural world and in terms of Christmas for me, as a opportunity to hang out a little bit more in that darkness, hang out a little bit more in that quiet, in that emptiness, and to see it really as a profound invitation where out of that darkness, out of that emptiness, there could be a profound birth for myself. And I invite you into thinking it a little bit in that same way for you. one of my teachers, Adi Ashanti, when he talks about the Christmas story, he talks about it from a much bigger perspective. And I love what he says. He says, Christ in this sense symbolizes a much greater birth, this birth of divinity really entering into humanity. Yes, it's symbolized in this person, but that's much bigger than any one person or any one religion. And in a way, we're all invited to participate in this birth at this time of year, right? And like with any birth, and those of you mothers joining the session today, you know that having brought life, physical, biological life into the world, that there's a huge period of preparation called the pregnancy and the gestation that happens for many, many months, 9 months, right, in the womb, where this life is literally being formed, is growing, is being brought to fruition. And what was once an empty space in our body is now being filled with this life. And even during the actual process of labor, even if you haven't gone through labor, you may have attended a birth and you've probably witnessed, and I went through it myself, and I'm sure many of you mothers did too, that the further the labor progresses and the more intense the pain gets, also there's a sense as the person giving birth, as the mother in that sense, that we're drawn more and more inward. We get more and more focused. We get more and more quiet, and basically nothing else matters anymore. And it gets real stripped away down to just what matters in this one moment is bringing out this life. And even though Advent isn't about childbirth in that sense, it's not about a physical birth, it is about a spiritual birth. And the invitation is the same in that sense, to really stop, go inside, and come to what is the bare essential. What is, as Jesus called it, what is the one thing necessary, the one thing that matters most? In his terminology, it was the source of life. You may have a different word for that. For you, it might be presence. For you, it might be compassion or truth or love. But we're invited to enter into this time where the outer circumstances of nature are giving us this invitation to hibernate, to consciously move back into that deeper place inside and reorient ourselves to that one thing that matters most. It's kind of ironic because externally, this is one of the busiest seasons in the external world, a little bit less so this year with COVID, but we know how busy the Christmas season can get, right? With the shopping and the stores being open with extended hours and holiday parties, and so much of our attention can get focused externally, maybe even more so at this time of year. And that actually can be very beautiful in its own right, as long as it's balanced with this internal paying attention. If we get out of balance with the gift giving and buying just the right thing for everybody, we forget the other gift, the inner gift that wants to be unwrapped this season, which is the gift of your own presence and the unique way that the divine wants to shine through you out into the world. So Advent helps us to balance that, helps us to remember the deeper undercurrent that this season is about, and invites us to abide a little bit more fully in that darkness, in that emptiness, as a way to prepare ourselves for the birth to come. And I know for myself, and I can imagine for many of you, hanging out in that darkness, hanging out in that emptiness can be challenging. That's why we fill ourselves up with all of the distractions and in all the ways we do. In a way, it kind of goes against our biological nature to hang out here in what the mystics called this cave of the heart. And the mystics can actually help us on our journey in Advent because they had the courage to, in a way, spend a lot of time in the darkness, in the silence. They knew that in that, even if it was a little bit scary or a little bit unknown, a part of them knew that's actually where the great transformation takes place. That's where liberation, death, and rebirth takes place. So we're invited in these coming weeks to become mystics in a sense and spend a little bit of time as a monk or a nun in this cave of our own hearts and see what happens by doing that. Check it out. And I don't want to tell you what will happen. It will be unique for each of us, but what will happen when we spend a little more time there? I'll end with a quote from one of my teachers on this path, Richard Rohr, who talked about Advent in relationship to our ego. And he said, some have cleverly said that ego is an acronym for edging God out. There's got to be so much emptiness, or we cannot begin to point ourselves into something bigger. Such emptiness doesn't just fall into our laps. Such humility doesn't just happen. It's often the byproduct of 1,000 letting goes and 1,000 acts of devotion. All of our attempts to not edge God out, but rather invite God in. And that's really at the core of what we're invited to do in Advent. You know, most of our day to day busyness and the way we live our lives, myself included, in a way, are different forms of edging God out. And you could substitute God for whatever works for you: presence, compassion, truth, you know, all the ways that we try to do life by ourselves without opening to something much greater, that greater field of compassion and presence that are always available, but we often edge it out. And so in this Advent season, we want to practice consciously edging that in, bringing that in. So I want to invite you just for a couple of minutes to do some reflection. You could do that if you have a pen and paper handy. You could do that by writing, or you could jot some notes down, or even just do some reflection internally to ask yourself, and for me to ask myself, how do I edge God out? How do I create a busy day or a busy week or a busy life that somehow ignores or leaves out presence, leaves out compassion? How do I distract myself from that empty space of the heart? So take a few minutes just to see, again, not as a way to beat ourselves up or judge ourselves. This is part of the human condition. This is part of the egoic structure, if you will, is this distraction machine. And the more we can understand it, the more we can actually have compassion for it. And the more we can open ourselves to something greater than it. But we can't do that if we're judging ourselves. So even as you do this inquiry, see if you can hold it lightly, hold it from compassion, and just see, okay, how does my own human condition at times ignore presence, ignore silence, ignore compassion? So take a couple of minutes just to reflect on that for yourself. How do I distract myself from the one thing that matters most? Just taking another minute to compassionately reflect on that. What are the ways I lose connection to my true north? And then the next and last question, how can I consciously enter into these weeks of Advent as a way to make more space in my life for spirit, for presence, for God, for compassion, for quietude? How can I use this season of Advent to bring God in more intentionally? How can these coming weeks be an opportunity to redirect my compass towards what matters most? Taking one more minute for that. And without making any kind of to-do list about this, because we don't want this to become just another thing we need to do, just see if there's one small action that you can commit to that can help you stay more connected. Maybe even a small action of like, I'm going to light a candle once a day to remind myself of this. It could be incredibly small as an action, but it could have profound significance for you. So see if there's something that you feel drawn to commit towards, helping yourself return to what matters most in this season. And finding a way to complete that reflection. If you are writing, just finishing up and putting your pens down. And I want to guide us into a little meditation practice that I find very useful at this time of year. You could call it an Advent meditation if you want, but it's really sort of just a very simple meditation practice that the early they called them the desert fathers and mothers, the early Christian mystics engaged in, which isn't much different than our Buddhist brothers and sisters or other traditions that engaged in different meditation practices, because at the core, most meditation practices are about going from this movement, which is hanging on. This is kind of the physical posture that we live most of our day with, kind of hanging on and being in control. And meditation at its core is kind of helping us move from this to this, right? From that tight fist to a letting go. a letting go, a letting go. And this is a great practice to help us use meditation and the breath to let go. Advent, in a way, is an invitation to, just like we see out in nature right now, that the trees show us so beautifully, their willingness to shed all those leaves. Think of the unbelievable ability to just every year shed everything that's near and dear to us and stand in that stark bareness, if you will. And so this meditation can help us stand in that same stark bareness that can be very useful at times in our lives. So find a posture for yourself that's comfortable. We'll just be sitting for maybe 5 to 7 minutes. It won't be that long, but get yourself comfortable. And if you're able to, just close your eyes. And just for a moment, I'd like us to imagine that metaphor that the mystics used, that they called the cave of the heart. And I want to invite us just to imagine or even sense or feel that we could descend from our usual thinking mind where we live most of the time. We kind of energetically live up in our mind. I want to invite us with this practice to imagine or even feel the energy that's normally up in our head descending down through our head, through our brain, down through our cheeks and our jaw, down further through our neck and shoulders, letting all of those areas just soften and relax, letting the muscles in our face soften, letting our jaw soften and wiggle and relax, and our neck and shoulders, just sensing those softening and releasing, and letting the energy descend even more into our chest, letting the chest soften and relax, and then bringing our attention into the space of the heart. In spiritual symbolism, this is sort of right at the center of our chest. And kind of imagining for a moment this space of the heart as an empty, spacious cave. And here it is, the winter, and we are invited to consciously hibernate in this cave of the heart. So you could imagine or even sense yourself entering this cave that is quiet, that is spacious, that is dark. Noticing if that brings up any fear or trepidation, and if it does, just taking some deeper breaths and feeling yourself grounded and rooted and supported by the earth beneath you. And just call on any support from the earth, from your connection with spirit. Invite in that support as you sit down in this cave for a few minutes, consciously entering the darkness, the emptiness, but entering it from a place of hope, knowing that you are supported, knowing that at any moment you could light a candle and illuminate this whole cave with light. And on your inhale, using the in-breath to practice opening up to this spacious quality of the heart. The heart can be empty, but empty in a good way, empty in a spacious way. See if on your inhale you can just open up to the expansive nature of this cave of the heart. And on the exhale, we are invited, just like the breath leaving our body, we are invited to release, to relinquish, to let go of anything we don't need right now in this cave of the heart. So inhaling and practicing opening, expanding into that spaciousness. Exhaling, practicing letting go of thought, letting go of commentary, letting go of anything not needed right now. And just for a few minutes together, we practice this ancient art of opening and surrendering. The two movements essential to the journey, the spiritual journey. Breathing in, opening to the spaciousness, to the darkness, to the emptiness of this cave. And exhaling, relinquishing, letting go of anything not essential right now. Doing that movement as I am quiet for the next couple of minutes, just doing that movement with the own rhythm of your breath. Inhaling, opening, exhaling, letting go. Taking another minute in this practice of being in this cave of the heart, opening on the inhale, releasing, relinquishing, surrendering on the exhale. Half a minute more, consciously returning to this practice, opening up and letting go. Couple more breaths. And taking a deeper breath now to complete that practice, but just staying a moment more connected to this space of the heart. In Advent, this place of the heart is like the womb. This place of the heart is where this birth of divinity takes place within us. And so, as we enter in a moment into the practice of chanting, we're going to be inviting in that which is sacred to us into this empty heart and inviting that in to fill it. So, in this chant, connecting for yourself to what it is you deem holy, what it is you deem sacred, and what it is you want to consciously invite into your own heart. For those of you that like to chant along, and that is a practice that helps you, you'll see the words to the chant on the screen in a moment. And for those of you that like to use the practice of listening, whatever works for you to invoke the energy of this chant for yourself. Come and fill our hearts. And as we complete this chant, staying a moment more just connected with your own heart space, and take in these words. Beneath the darkness, there is light. It came forth in the fullness of time, though it was and is always here. Beneath the gray horizons, the hunger, the longing, the loneliness and anxiety is a different realm, one that is now and always in our midst. It begs to have the eyes of our hearts opened to it.